when my Uber driver locked all the car doors at 2 in the morning and told me not to get out, I genuinely thought I was about to be kidnapped. My heart was racing, my hand was on my pepper spray, and I was seconds away from calling the police. But when 3 police cars surrounded us just 5 minutes later, I realized that this stranger had actually just saved me from something far worse than I ever could have imagined. My name is Jasmine Parker. I'm 23 years old, and this is the story of the night a complete stranger risked everything to protect me from a danger I didn't even know existed. I work as a bartender at a downtown club called Electric Noir. It's one of those places that gets packed on weekend nights, with loud music, crowded dance floors, and customers who always want one more drink right when we're trying to close. I've been working there for about 8 months now, ever since I graduated from college. The job isn't glamorous, and the hours are brutal, but the tips are decent, and I need the money to pay off my student loans while I figure out what I actually want to do with my life. That particular Saturday night in late September had been exhausting. The club was completely packed. We were understaffed because 2 servers called in sick, and I was running around nonstop from 7 in the evening until we finally closed at 1:30 in the morning. By the time I finished all my closing duties, counted my tips, and helped clean up, it was already almost 2 o'clock. I was dead tired. My feet hurt from standing in heels for 7 hours straight. All I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. Normally, my roommate Bethany picks me up after my late shifts. She's a good friend, and she doesn't mind staying up late because she works from home and keeps weird hours anyway. But earlier that evening, Bethany had texted me saying she had really bad food poisoning and couldn't leave the bathroom, let alone drive across town to get me. I felt bad for her, but I also understood. My car was in the shop getting the transmission fixed, so I had no choice but to order an Uber. I stood outside the club entrance on the side street where staff usually exit. During operating hours, this street is busy with people coming and going, but once the club closes, it becomes eerily quiet and dark. Usually, our head bouncer Derek waits outside until all the female staff leave safely. But that night, his girlfriend had gone into early labor and he'd rushed to the hospital around midnight. So I was completely alone on that empty street, just me and the dim streetlights, and the distant sound of traffic from the main road a few blocks away. I pulled out my phone and requested an Uber. The app showed me my driver's information. His name was Terrence Williams. He had a 4.9-star rating with over 3,000 completed rides, and he was driving a silver Honda Accord. The app said he'd arrive in 4 minutes. I waited, checking my phone every few seconds, feeling a little nervous about being alone, but telling myself I was being paranoid. This was a safe neighborhood. Nothing bad ever happened here. When the silver Honda pulled up to the curb, I could see the driver through the windshield. He was a black man who looked like he was in his late 40s or maybe early 50s, wearing glasses and a plain gray sweater. He had a kind face, maybe a little tired, but that made sense given it was 2 in the morning. He looked completely normal and non-threatening. I opened the back door and slid into the seat. The car smelled faintly like pine air freshener mixed with coffee. I said, "Hi, I'm Jasmine, heading to Oak Street Apartments." Terrence nodded, confirmed my destination on his phone mounted to the dashboard, and pulled away from the curb. Soft jazz music played quietly from his speakers. I settled into my seat, pulled out my phone, and started texting Bethany to check how she was feeling. I also started counting my tips from the night. $240. Not bad at all. If you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from right now. My apartment was about 15 minutes away from the club, and the route usually took us through the warehouse district, which was always completely deserted at night. For the first few minutes, everything seemed perfectly normal. I was scrolling through my phone, half paying attention to the route, when I noticed Terrence kept glancing up at his rearview mirror, not at me, but at the road behind us. At first, I didn't think much of it. Drivers check their mirrors all the time, but then I noticed his hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than before, and he kept looking back every few seconds like he was watching something specific. Then suddenly he made a turn that definitely wasn't on the route to my apartment. I looked up from my phone, confused. I said, "Excuse me, I think you just missed the turn back there. Terrence didn't answer right away. He made another turn, then another, taking us deeper into an industrial area I didn't recognize at all. My heart started beating faster. I sat up straighter and said, "Hey, where are you going? This isn't the way to my apartment." That's when I heard it. A loud mechanical click as all 4 car doors locked simultaneously. The sound made my stomach drop. I immediately grabbed the door handle and pulled hard, but it wouldn't budge. The door was completely locked. Panic shot through my entire body like electricity. I said, "Unlock these doors right now, or I'm calling the police." My hand was already reaching into my purse for my phone when Terrence finally spoke, his voice urgent, but trying hard to stay calm. He said, "Please, just listen to me for 1 second. Don't get out of this car. Don't try to jump out. Just trust me for 5 minutes. I know exactly how this looks, but you're in serious danger right now, and I'm trying to help you." My mind immediately went to every horrible story I'd ever heard about rideshare drivers attacking passengers. I said, "I don't know what you're planning, but I have pepper spray in my purse, and people know exactly where I am right now." Terrence shook his head quickly and said, "I'm not trying to hurt you. I promise you that. There's a car that's been following us since the moment I picked you up from your work. A black SUV with no front license plate. They've been staying exactly 3 car lengths behind us this entire time, matching every single turn I make. When I slow down, they slow down. When I speed up, they speed up. That's not normal driving behavior. That's deliberately following someone." I felt my throat tighten. I turned around in my seat and looked through the back window. Sure enough, there was a black SUV behind us in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. My voice came out shaky when I said, "Maybe they're just going the same direction we are. Maybe it's just a coincidence." Terrence said, "I've been driving for Uber for 6 years now. I've taken defensive driving courses and security awareness training. I know what it looks like when someone is tailing another vehicle. I started testing them about 4 minutes ago by taking random turns that make no sense. And they're still right behind us. Somebody is following you, and based on their behavior, I really don't think they have good intentions." I felt my stomach twist into painful knots. I said, "Why would anyone follow me? I'm nobody special. I'm just a bartender." Terrence glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and his eyes were filled with genuine concern. He said, "I don't know why, but I've already called 911. I called them 3 minutes ago. They're sending police officers to intercept us right now. The dispatcher told me to keep driving, don't stop the car for any reason, and don't let you out of this vehicle until police arrive on scene. That's why I locked the doors. Not to trap you or hurt you, but to keep you safe inside this car where I can protect you." Jasmine didn't know whether to believe him or not. Every instinct in her body screamed that being locked inside a car with a strange man at 2 in the morning was dangerous. But something about the fear in Terrence's voice, the way his hands were shaking slightly on the steering wheel, made her look back at that SUV again. It was still there, maintaining that exact same distance behind them, never getting closer but never falling back either. She said, "How long until the police get here?" Terrence said they told me approximately 5 minutes from when I called, so maybe 2 more minutes now. "Just please stay calm and stay in the car with me. We're going to get through this together." Those next 2 minutes felt like the longest 2 minutes of my entire life. Terrence kept driving through the industrial district, making turns but never stopping, never slowing down enough to let the SUV get any closer to us. I kept my eyes glued to that black vehicle behind us, watching its headlights follow our every move. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I texted Bethany, even though I knew she was sick. I typed out something weird is happening in my Uber. Driver says someone is following us. Police are coming. I'm really scared. I hit send and watched the message go through, praying that if something bad happened to me, at least someone would know. I checked the time on my phone obsessively. 1:58, 1:59, 2 o'clock, 2:01. Every second dragged on forever. Terrence kept glancing between the road ahead and his rearview mirror, and I could see sweat forming on his forehead, despite the air conditioning running in the car. He said, "Just a little longer. They should be here any second now." Then, at exactly 2:05 in the morning, I saw red and blue flashing lights appear from 2 different directions. 3 police cars came speeding toward us from different streets, their sirens wailing, and they positioned themselves to box in both Terrence's Honda and the black SUV that had been following us. It was like something out of an action movie, except this was real, and my heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode out of my chest. The moment the police cars surrounded us with their lights flashing everywhere, Terrence immediately pulled over to the side of the road and put the car in park. He reached over and unlocked all the doors. The click sound made me jump. He turned around to look at me and said, "Stay in the car until the police officers tell you it's safe to get out, okay? Just stay put." I nodded, unable to form words. I watched through the back window as 4 police officers jumped out of their vehicles with their hands on their weapons, surrounding the black SUV. The SUV's brake lights glowed bright red in the darkness. For a terrifying moment, I thought whoever was driving might try to speed away or do something crazy, but the vehicle just sat there. Then slowly, the driver's side door opened. A police officer shouted loudly, "Show me your hands. Get out of the vehicle slowly with your hands where I can see them." I watched as a man stepped out of the SUV. He was wearing all dark clothing, maybe in his 30s, and he had his hands raised above his head. 2 officers immediately rushed toward him, while shouting commands I couldn't quite hear. One officer pushed him forward against the side of the SUV and handcuffed him, while another officer started searching the vehicle with a flashlight, leaning inside and looking around carefully. A female police officer walked over to Terrence's car and tapped on his window. Terrence lowered the window and the officer said, "Are you the driver who called in this incident?" Terrence nodded and said, "Yes, ma'am. My name is Terrence Williams. I'm the Uber driver, and this is my passenger, Jasmine Parker." The officer leaned down slightly to look at me in the back seat. She said, "Are you okay? Are you hurt? Did anyone harm you in any way?" I shook my head because my voice didn't seem to be working properly. She said, "I need both of you to step out of the vehicle so we can take your statements and figure out exactly what happened here tonight." Terrence got out first, and I opened my door on shaky legs. The moment I stood up, I felt dizzy. All the adrenaline that had been keeping me alert suddenly started to fade, and I felt weak and cold, even though it was a warm September night. Another officer, a Hispanic man who introduced himself as Officer Rodriguez, approached me with a notebook in his hand. He said, "Can you tell me where you were tonight and where you were heading when you got into this Uber?" I explained about working at Electric Noir, about finishing my shift late, about ordering the ride home because my roommate was sick and my car was broken. Officer Rodriguez wrote everything down carefully. He said, "And you didn't notice anyone following you before you got into the vehicle?" I said no. I had no idea anyone was following me at all until my driver told me. Rodriguez nodded and said, "Okay, just stay right here for a moment." I watched as Officer Rodriguez walked over to where the other officers were standing near the black SUV. They were pulling things out of the vehicle and laying them on the ground, and even from where I stood, I could tell something was very wrong based on how the officers' body language changed. They started moving faster, talking into their radios with more urgency, and one officer kept shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. After a few minutes, an officer walked quickly over to Rodriguez and said something quietly that I couldn't hear, but Rodriguez's expression went from calm to serious instantly. He walked back over to me and said, "I need to ask you something very important. Have you noticed anyone watching you recently? Anyone following you home from work or showing up places where you normally go? Any strange encounters with people you don't know or weird messages online?" I thought about it carefully and said no, nothing like that at all. I would have noticed if someone was following me, right? Why are you asking me this? Rodriguez hesitated for a moment, like he was trying to figure out how to tell me something difficult. Then he said, "We found photographs in that vehicle. Multiple photographs of you. Some of them were taken tonight outside your workplace. Some are from other nights over the past several weeks. There's also a notebook with detailed information about you, including your work schedule, your home address, and notes about your daily routine and habits." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. All the air went out of my lungs. I said, "What do you mean photographs of me? Who is that man? I've never seen him before in my entire life." Rodriguez said, "We're running his identification right now to find out who he is, But based on what we've found in his vehicle, it's clear that you've been stalked for at least several weeks, possibly longer. You really never noticed him before? Never saw him hanging around your work or your apartment? I shook my head, feeling sick to my stomach. I said I swear I've never seen that person. I had no idea anyone was watching me or following me. How is that even possible? Rodriguez said, unfortunately, stalkers can be very good at staying hidden and blending into crowds. He asked me to sit in the back of one of the police cars with the door open while they continued processing the scene and gathering evidence. I sat there feeling numb, watching officers take photos of everything, bag up items from the SUV, and talk to Terrence, who was giving his statement to another officer. After about 15 minutes, Rodriguez came back with a tablet computer in his hands. He said, I need to show you something, but I want you to prepare yourself, because it's going to be very disturbing. He pulled up a folder of photos that had been taken from the stalker's phone. Image after image of me leaving work, walking to different Uber and Lyft pickups, sitting in coffee shops on my days off, buying groceries, going into my apartment building. There had to be at least 50 photos, maybe even more. Some were taken from far away across the street, with what must have been a zoom lens. Others were taken much closer, like the person had been standing just a few feet away from me. In some of the photos, I was looking right at the camera, but I had no memory of seeing this person or having my picture taken. My hands started shaking so violently that I had to clench them into fists to make it stop. I said, I don't understand any of this. Why would someone do this to me? What did I do wrong? Rodriguez said, you didn't do anything wrong at all. This isn't your fault. Unfortunately, stalkers often fixate on victims completely randomly, or for reasons that only make sense in their own minds. But here's what concerns us the most. He swiped to another image on the tablet. It was a screenshot from the Uber app showing my ride request from tonight, including the exact pickup location outside Electric Noir and my home address as the destination. Rodriguez said this man somehow had access to your rideshare account information. He knew exactly when and where you'd be requesting a ride tonight. He knew you'd be alone and vulnerable. If your driver hadn't noticed him following and hadn't taken immediate action to protect you, this man would have known exactly where you live and exactly what time you'd be arriving home alone at 2 a.m. with nobody around to help you. The full reality of how close I had come to something terrible hit me all at once, like a wave crashing over my head. I started crying right there in the back of that police car, not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that just kept streaming down my face as my body finally released all the fear and shock I'd been holding. Inside, Officer Rodriguez handed me a small packet of tissues and sat down next to me. He said, you're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore. We're placing him under arrest tonight on multiple charges including stalking, criminal harassment, unlawful surveillance, and possession of tools with intent to commit a crime. When we searched his vehicle thoroughly, we found items that strongly suggest he was planning to escalate his behavior very soon. We found a knife, rope, duct tape, and latex gloves. Based on the evidence and his behavior tonight, you were potentially just hours away from a very dangerous situation. Another officer brought Terrence over to where I was sitting. He looked exhausted and deeply worried, and when he saw me crying, his whole face softened with concern. He said, "Are you going to be okay? I'm so sorry you had to go through something this terrifying." I wiped my eyes with the tissues and looked up at him. I said, "You saved my life tonight. If you hadn't been paying attention, if you hadn't noticed that car following us, if you hadn't called the police and kept me safe in your car, I don't even want to think about what might have happened to me. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I thought you were trying to hurt me when you locked the doors." Terrence shook his head quickly and said, "Please don't apologize for that. You had every right in the world to be scared. A stranger locks you inside a car at 2 a.m. Of course, your first thought would be that you're in danger. I completely understand. I just thank God I noticed that SUV early enough to do something about it." The stalker was identified as Nathan Kraus, a 32-year-old man who had been unemployed for almost a year after losing his job in information technology. During the investigation over the following weeks, police discovered that Nathan had become obsessed with me after seeing me at Electric Noir during a bachelor party he attended about 2 months earlier. He had created multiple fake social media accounts to follow me online and watch my posts. He had been tracking my movements and schedule for weeks. He had even figured out how to get access to rideshare user data by paying a former employee of one of the companies who sold him information illegally. That employee was also arrested. The most terrifying part was that Nathan had been planning to break into my apartment that exact night after I got home from work. The police found detailed plans written in his notebook, describing how he would wait until I fell asleep and then break in through a back window that didn't have a security sensor. If Terrence hadn't intervened, I would have gone home completely unaware that someone was planning to hurt me. The weeks and months after that night were incredibly difficult for me. I couldn't go back to work at Electric Noir because every time I thought about that place, I thought about Nathan watching me from the shadows. I quit and found a new job working daytime, hours at a bookstore in a different neighborhood. Bethany and I moved to a different apartment building, one with much better security, including cameras and a front desk attendant. I started seeing a therapist twice a week to deal with the trauma of learning I'd been stalked for months without having any idea. The paranoia was the absolute worst part. Every person walking behind me on the sidewalk felt like a potential threat. Every car that took the same turns as me felt like it might be following me. I stopped using rideshare apps completely for almost 6 months, only accepting rides from Bethany or my older brother Marcus. But slowly, with a lot of therapy and support from people who loved me, I started to heal and feel safe again. I learned everything I could about digital safety and privacy. I changed every single password I had and enabled 2-factor authentication on all my accounts. I took a self-defense class and installed security cameras in my new apartment. The most important thing I learned, though, was about people and trust. Before that night, I'd always been taught to be afraid of strangers, especially men, especially in vulnerable situations. And while being cautious is important, that night taught me that sometimes the person who seems suspicious might actually be your guardian angel. Terrence and I stayed in touch after everything happened. We met for coffee a few weeks later, and he told me about his own daughter who was my age and also worked late-night shifts. He said that's exactly why he always stays alert during his rides, because he thinks about his daughter and hopes that other drivers would look out for her the same way. Nathan Kraus pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 8 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment. If you made it to the end of this story, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The real lesson here isn't just about being careful with rideshare apps or watching out for stalkers. It's about the fact that sometimes danger comes from places you never expect, and sometimes safety comes from strangers who choose to care. What saved me that night wasn't luck. It was one person's choice to pay attention and take action, even when it would have been easier to just mind his own business. We all have the power to be that person for someone else.